everybody. Welcome for joining us. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we started off the meeting with some music that we are hoping is helping to get us grounded and starting this meeting with a land acknowledgement. November is Native American Heritage Month. And so as I share my land acknowledgement, I invite you to do as well in the chat. So I am living and working on unceded Muwekma and Tamian land, which is present day San Jose, California. I am going to open us off with looking at the agenda for what we are going to be discussing today. We have a speaker joining us, Courtney Baltiyskyy from San Diego Children's First Collective. So we will be leading into a discussion about what San Diego Children's First Collective is, what they've been doing, and how we can learn from their work and maybe building off of that in other communities, other counties and regions throughout the state. After her presentation, we'll open the space for reflections and conversations. You will be able to ask questions in the Q&A, ask comments and follow-up discussion in the chat. So at this time, we welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat. If you want to include any role, any affiliation you have, you're welcome to do so. And then I'd also like to take this moment to introduce Shelly Maser to introduce herself.
Thanks, Pamela. Hi, everybody. So great to see so many people joining us today. We're excited to have you. I know some of you, but for not all of you. So my name is Shelly Maser. I joined LIF on October 3rd, LIF and Build Up California. I am the Director of Partnerships and Capacity Building. Build Up is part of my portfolio of work, so I'm excited to be here as a staff person. Some of you I met when I was on the Build Up Advisory Committee. I also serve on the Build Up San Mateo Advisory Committee and have worked with LIF on a variety of other projects and webinars reflecting my experience as a councilwoman in Redwood City and as a former school board member also in Redwood City. And I come directly from Council for Strong America, where we organize leaders in business, law enforcement, and retired military to advocate for investments in kids. So this is sort of a natural next extension of my career, and I'm super excited to be a part of LIF. I'm also happy to be able to partner more closely with Courtney Baltiyskyy. Courtney is a really amazing person who you'll hear from in just a minute. She's the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at the YMCA of San Diego. She is also the co-facilitator of the San Diego Children's First Collective in San Diego. And just want to read to you their sort of overview of what they do. They bring together an effective group of organizations and leaders to tackle the challenges of access to affordable quality childcare in San Diego County communities. The work they've been able to accomplish is fantastic, related to childcare and improving conditions for kids in San Diego County. So I'm excited for you guys to hear from Courtney. I do want to just acknowledge that we had also planned to have Christine Padilla from Build Up San Mateo be a part of this webinar today. Unfortunately, Christine is sick today, and so she wasn't able to join us. We're really happy to be able to reschedule her, so you have something to look forward to in hearing from Christine in a few months when we bring her to join us. So with that, I'm excited to turn it over to Courtney. Courtney, you all set?
I am all set. Thank you, Shelly, and hello, everyone. How we doing? We have the chat enabled. Yes, thank you, Pamela. We got this tech thing on lock now, nearly 3 years into it. But thanks so much for that gracious introduction, Shelly. Again, my name's Courtney Baltiyskyy. The irony of my life currently is that my last name has 3 Y's in it, and I work for the YMCA. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you from Kumeyaay Land here in San Diego County. As Shelley said, I am the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy for the YMCA here, where one of our priority legislative issues is access to affordable quality childcare. But today we're going to be talking more about brain baby that I helped foster a number of years ago, which is the Children First Collective San Diego. I do want to give a shout out to my other facilitator, Erin Hogeboom, who is also on the webinar and will be sharing lots of information and love in the chat there. I'm going to go ahead and share screen as we work through some of the information on Children First Collective San Diego. But before I launch to this deck and share information about the importance of the collaboration that we fostered here in San Diego, as well as some of the background and campaigns of the Children First Collective, I would love to just introduce us to a deep collective breath or two. I know we're still coming out of a holiday long weekend. A lot of us are running different directions. Hopefully you had something to eat for your midday meal. If not, feel free to munch through this, but we'll go ahead and close our eyes together and take an inhale and exhale. One more, inhale. And exhale. Thank you. I lead us through this because it is one of the methodologies that we like to incorporate in the culture that we've developed with Children First Collective San Diego. As we know, being advocates, tireless work, and it's really important that we are caring for ourselves as well as each other for the marathon is systems level change for access to quality, affordable childcare. So as a best practice in our work with Children First Collective, we do take care of ourselves through mindfulness tactics and in opening a lot of our sessions with that collective breathing. We also do a lot in building camaraderie in opening meetings. We like to prompt a spirited question, oftentimes, to get people talking and to continue to build authentic relationships. So next, I'll ask you all to just take a step back and think about a success that you've had recently in the work that you do. Think about a success that you've had recently in the work that you do. And as that success comes to mind, feel free to put it into the chat. It could be a legislative win. It could be a meeting that you've scheduled. It could be a new partner. But any success that you've had recently. If you're comfortable sharing, feel free to put it in the chat. Getting the grant. Yes. I'm not sure what grant that is celebrating for you. I hope it was a big one, catalytic. Yes, in San Diego, we've recently had a local measure passed that will create great access to childcare. Great. Increased funding, held a meeting, greet with elected officials. I love it. Lots of successes there. And in those successes, I want you to think about the folks who helped make that success possible. And when you reached that goal, found that success, who was the first person in the work that you texted, that you called, that you celebrated with? And as we work through this presentation together, just hold that person in your mind's eye and in your heart, and think about the feelings that that relationship brings to you, both personally and professionally. Because it is that spirit that really drives collaboration and really makes this work worth doing for so many of us. So before we get into more information about the Children First Collective San Diego, I just wanted to hone in on a newer concept that I've been grappling with, and hopefully others find it interesting as well. But it's really the importance and the why to collaboration. This matrix was brought to my attention through an article called Plotting Impact on Simple Metrics. This is from the Stanford Institute for Social Innovation, but it really delves into this concept of impact being on a spectrum. And in the success that a lot of you have articulated in the chat or are thinking through, that success may be incremental in a shorter term goal to reach a longer term goal. And you'll see that kind of plotted on the matrix here. So when we think about the emergence and that spectrum of impact, we can think about it in two different dynamics outlined in this matrix here. The y-axis here is talking about the pace at which the work comes. Starting with something faster emerging and going to something that's a little slower emerging. The y-axis here is talking about intangible things as well as tangible things. So all of the four components of the matrix are critical to the work that we do as advocates. When we think about these four quadrants, in my mind, the quadrant that is intangible and slower emerging when it comes to collaborations is really the most important quadrant here. This is where we are doing our base building. This is where we are amassing power, but this is where we are understanding our shared values that help define our goals. And once we amass power with our collaborations that are all goal-oriented, all value-aligned, we then work through engagement with our influencers. And oftentimes in the work that Build Up California are doing, that engagement with influencers is focused on our elected officials, as well as allies in other sectors, as well as allies in media. But we are trying to engage and influence through the tactics on the bottom here. And that comes down to concrete actions that help influence, as well as policy change. But we know policy change can be tangible, but incredibly slow emerging. I stand on the shoulders of giants here, and I know that there are folks on the call doing this work in advocacy for childcare far longer than I have. But it is the ongoing concrete actions focused on the influencers through collaboration that will get us farther faster in systems level and policy change. So again, this is a newer approach to understanding why collaboration really matters, and also just validates the fact that those feelings that we have in successful collaboration, again, really make work meaningful. It's something that motivates me every single day that I sign on to do the the work with and for our community, and I hope that others find the same in their communities. So the Children First Initiative has shared values in equity, compassion, and hope. We do this work by continuing to dedicate ourselves to learning and unlearning, and always take time to acknowledge the fact that these systems of childcare, they are not broken. They are functioning as intended on system and justice that continue to perpetuate inequities focused on sexism, classism, racism. And it is not lost on us that these injustices continue to be particularly acute for our childcare sector, especially women of color who are doing the lion's share of this work. Again, it's a great privilege to be co-facilitating the Children First Collective as an aspiring ally. Again, responsibility to continue to unlearn these systems, and also to engage in conversations and push myself in newer relationships with people this work, and especially those who don't look like me as a privileged white lady. So story started a little over 3 years ago now. It's a story that we remember fondly, but hope not to repeat. And I say that because a lot of this work was fostered at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. A number of us who are advocates across the childcare sector were oftentimes only running into each other on Southwest flights up to Sacramento to do statewide advocacy. But it was kind of spurred urgency on those flights that we decided to come together locally and see what we could help influence in San Diego with our local elected officials. We had been for a couple months consulting with folks like Margaret Broadkin and Funding the Next Generation to understand what could be possible in the San Diego region in impact system level change to give all access to quality, affordable childcare. So it was fortunate that we had been meeting, because as early as March 16th, 2020, we came together that first Monday morning and started a discussion about what the childcare, what families really needed as we went into the unknown of the pandemic. And as many of you remember, it was the Wild West for childcare sector. Providers were deemed essential, but we had very little guidance coming out from the state, from our county, about what that meant. And we had over 4,000 providers in San Diego County who remained open so that our economy could prosper in San Diego and families could continue to work. But they needed support, they needed to be heard. And so it was at that time that we formed an emergency task force. We led a conversation every single day for about 6 months. Oftentimes those conversations were facilitated while my daughter Nora, who was 2 at the time, was eating Halloween candy in the morning. But we got through it, and we developed not only a comprehensive plan to talk about the childcare crisis, bring light to it, because we have more momentum than ever before in folks understanding that it was scarce, inconvenient, unaffordable, and that it varied in quality. But also, we got smart quickly together on what our local elected officials could do in those early days of the pandemic. Again, as many of you probably remember, especially for our healthcare industry, there was a critical need for childcare to keep hospitals staffed. And that, as well as other essential sectors, just necessitated a lot of support in caring for children, especially during the pandemic when schools were closed. So some of the tactics that we employed early on were to hold media conferences and webinars that spotlighted the voices not only of parents, but also our childcare providers, and to really broaden folks' understanding of the childcare crisis. I'll share fondly that one of these first tactics and media opportunities was memorably interrupted and kind of Zoom bombed in the last moments of the press conference. But it was memorable and kept people talking about childcare for days, weeks, months to come. But some interesting early lesson technology there. Through those tactics and the concrete actions, we also started to intentionally build out in our collaboration. So the collaboration and our base building started to become more and more broad, and it also included what we often consider non-traditional partnership. So we built a base that included labor, so firefighters, police officers, United Healthcare workers. We had philanthropy as part of our base. We had employers, including the Hospital Association, Chamber of Commerce, our downtown partnership. We had childcare providers and representation across our childcare system. And that included and still includes working members from our R&R, from the 2 APs here, from First Five, our County Office of Ed, CSPPs, Head Start providers, as well as childcare provider union members and leaders locally. So with this powerful new coalition, we were able to have kind of 3 different arms of operation in those early days of the pandemic. And that included, to Erin's extraordinary organizational skills, PPE distribution hubs throughout our region, immediate financial support to child providers and families, as well as advocacy. I think the distribution hubs and the financial support to providers and families both help in folks understanding that they were being seen, that they were being heard, that their needs were being met to the extent that they could be by organization. And it also really pushed us to kind of walk the walk. You know, as individual organizations historically in San Diego, we'd been talking about the childcare crisis for a long time, but it was through our intentional collaboration and amassing that power where we could really harness the best of every organization for every childcare provider and family. And so we started to build out more trust and again, value alignment across providers and families as well, because we were delivering on what they were articulating that they needed. And that came into our advocacy action as well. So our shared successes during those 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic came down to, yes, greater awareness building about the childcare crisis, yes, relationship building across sectors, and really building that coalition out really broadly. Yes, engaging more with our investors and local elected officials. Yes, to those concrete actions, including the media spotlights. And then yes, to the slower emerging policy change. through an evidence-based approach. So some of the policy and financing that we were able to collectively secure includes $51 million in funding and then American Rescue Plan local dollars. So about $46 million came from the county of San Diego. That included $5 million for supplemental funding to essential worker vouchers, $25 million in grants to childcare providers in the fall of 2020. And we know that that was a difference maker in so many of our providers keeping their businesses viable during that first year of the pandemic. It also includes now a $10 million commitment to addressing the childcare workforce crisis, $2 million in a retention stipend for providers, funding for our Shared Service Alliance pilot, as well as rental funding to our local foster care bridge program. We also had $5 million from the city of San Diego to also complement for the essential worker vouchers. We also were able to position ourselves as a thought partner nationally, not only working with folks like Funding the Next Generation and Children's Funding Project in Washington, D.C., but I know we've met a number of you all who are on the call today, and it's a great privilege to be able to share the work we've done while also learning from so many of you and how you've built out your power and strategy in communities across California and a country. So it was probably about a year and a half ago that we did receive funding from a philanthropic entity and were able to brand and get more serious about our longer term vision and goals for supplemental funding for children, youth, and their families in San Diego County. And you'll see that that is one of our 6 main focus areas, is the local dedicated funding. It was around that time that we adopted the name of Children First Collective San Diego. It was at that time that we also did training together on undoing racism and in committing to an anti-bias approach to our work. We also set to develop a set of norms and values and guiding documents that helped really structure our working group and the commitment that we've made to each other. Through that process, we outlined these 6 focus areas, and though this isn't all inclusive of what the childcare crisis needs to make significant change, we do see these as 6 paramount issues that we can help influence locally. So that includes child homes and facilities in the mixed delivery system, addressing the childcare workforce crisis, increase mental and behavioral support for our 0 to 5-year-olds, their childcare providers, parents, and caregivers, job-related benefits and policies for working parents, local government infrastructure for children and families. So our current policy and advocacy goals, and these are kind of snapshots of the current campaigns that we have running, include a local municipal measure called Measure H. This did pass with 67% earlier in the month, and this was a charter amendment that enabled the city of San Diego to now have childcare be an allowable usage at our city's park and rec facilities. We are also working with the childcare law and a local council member on non-discrimination ordinance for family childcare providers. So this looks to strengthen resources for providers in understanding their tenant rights. We have a whistleblower opportunity set up through the city of San Diego as well as multiple resources that are accessible. We also have passed our first local infrastructure dedicated to children, youth, and their families, and that is the City of San Diego's Office of Child and Youth Success. We now work on a regular basis with that new executive director to help steer that office in a direction that has the most impact as possible in coordinating our systems. For the County of San Diego, again, we're helping to influence what those workforce development, stipends and facilities dollars are going to look like, working on supplemental funding for mental and behavioral health. We have a Live Well at Work initiative focused on family-friendly practices. And then we're also helping school districts, our county office of ed, and childcare providers understand the navigation of the new universal pre-kindergarten system. Within that, we are doing important local research and understanding some of the pain points in implementation and trying to work across our ecosystem locally so that families are aware of their options when considering what is best for their 5-year-olds. We do all this work also in conjunction with state and federal advocacy entities. So from the YMCA's perspective, we are active in the RNR network as well as CAPA, Every Child California, the ECE Coalition, and our responsibility and due diligence with the Children First Collective to help our local elected officials connect the dots and understand what's happening on a federal and level for childcare, and then what we can do locally to help improve that system and move things along, especially at this critical junction of the childcare crisis, where we continue to operate a public service that is not publicly funded. So we also have ongoing communication with our elected officials. Within our campaigns and scope of work, I'll also say that a priority tied to the expansion of facilities is working with folks like Shelley and the LIFT team on the concept of co-location of childcare within housing developments. So that's both within affordable housing as well as transit-oriented housing. But in working with LIFT, we have some cool original research that's coming out, and we do have now quarterly scheduled opportunities to help bring folks together in relationship building and, again, collaboration across municipal departments and official staffers, our housing developers, housing financiers, as well as the childcare sector. And brokering those relationships has also been incredibly rewarding and encouraging. And we do have already a number of co-location projects that are in discussion in our region as we took on that campaign and initiative to help broker those relationships and collaboration. So the structure of our work comes down to different main components. We do have a working group of about 18 different partners. These partners span across the childcare sector. I'm happy to review those agencies and entities again, if that's of interest for folks. But we every single week, Thursday mornings, 8:30 to 9:30, if anybody ever wants to pop in and be a fly on the wall or ask questions or share some of what you're doing in your community. And we structure those meetings to be a time of trust building and camaraderie. As many of you have experienced in the last 2.5 years, there is still significant communal grieving that is happening. We are grieving for implications of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are grieving for our housing crisis. We are grieving for the low wages that continue to be paid for our incredible child who do this work. We are collectively grieving for continued mass tragedy due to gun violence that our communities experience. And every time something catastrophic happens in our community, I think Children First Collective partners know that we can count on each other every single week when we come together, and we hold that space for that shared grief and for shared healing. We do that through, again, self-care in meditative practices, and in sharing a lot of ourselves, personally and professionally, in this critical work that we do as advocates. The other components of our structure include town hall meetings, where we open up strategy discussion to any and all folks across sectors, across the mixed delivery system of childcare, and across parent advocates. We host a monthly policy circle for elected officials, so that we have kind of a one-stop opportunity to learn everything that's happening in childcare advocacy, and what's happening on that federal, state, and then local. And then we have those quarterly co-location meetings exploring the concept of housing and childcare. So we like to say, you've come, you've learned, you've shared, now what? There's a number of ways to stay engaged with what we're doing. That includes joining listserv for updates and calls to action, help to activate campaigns, sharing stories, learning more about local data and impact, and then helping to lead calls. That includes town halls, as well as conversations about strategy with our elected officials, and other influencers. Again, Erin Hogeboom, who's here, and I facilitate this work, but we do not own it by any means. And I think that for succession planning and the sustainability of this entity, we do try to share the responsibility across partners, and we do try to be intentionally inclusive in building the scaffolding, but letting others, especially our childcare providers, take the stage to talk about their incredible work whenever possible, and especially when speaking to those in positions of power. So here's our contact information. Feel free to follow along. We're good with text, email, social media. I will give a plug for folks to follow us on social media, because we do have a really exciting new project that is taking off at the start of the calendar year. This is called the PB&J Fellowship. PB&J stands for Parents and Providers Bringing Joy, but we have 3 incredible parents from different walks of life who will be receiving ongoing coaching and compensation to calendar plan and run our social media handles. So again, walking the walk, being true to our values, leading with equity. We are doing what we can to empower these parents to lead in that work, to gain new skills, and to tell their critical stories about finding access to quality, affordable care. And with that, I'll just bring us back to, this first slide and this concept from the Stanford Institute of Social Innovation, and kind of open it up for questions or feedback. If this is resonating with folks, give a holler in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. That was amazing. I learned so much, and I hope that everyone who's attending got a nugget out of that they can continue to think about, build upon. And now is time for a robust discussion. If there are any questions, anything that you'd like to know more about that Courtney shared, I definitely had just a question about the cross-sector approach, which I think is something that I would really like to elevate in doing this work, because as someone who's been in the ECE field for about a decade now, and realizing that it really does take us going outside of just the folks in ECE to move the needle on change. And so you mentioned some of the unusual suspects, we'll call them, like Chamber of Commerce, downtown associations, police and fire departments. How did you or Children First Collective approach these new partnerships? Were there events that you were able to show up and introduce yourselves to? Was there a strategy? If you could just elaborate a little bit on how those new connections were made, if they weren't already existing.
Yeah, that's a great question, Pamela. And I think it all comes down to two really important components, and that intentional relationship building and having an evidence-based approach. So yes, it's showing up places where, childcare may not be top of mind, including economic development councils, the Chamber of Commerce, but it's finding those niche opportunities, insert the narrative of how important childcare is, right? And that's not only in conversations about it being powerful years in brain development and how critical it is to support our children today for their leadership in our communities tomorrow, but also really driving the narrative of how critical childcare is for our economic resilience, right? And following up on those conversations, knowing who in those organizations is going to resonate with the childcare narrative, and then bringing them as close as you can and wrapping your arms around that as often as possible. And part of that is also knowing what their objectives are, right? So how do you insert the childcare narrative while being complementary to the individual and organization's objectives? And you can do that by having an evidence-based approach. So we do have an advantage in San Diego because we have one resource and referral network, and that's the YMCA down here. We are able to expedite distilling data, only from surveys from childcare providers that we run on a regular basis, not only on our childcare availability data, but also in distilling district-specific childcare availability data, and having district-specific information or city-specific information has gone farther faster because those numbers, unfortunately, are all so stark and have really compelled folks into wanting to know what they can do, right? What they can do for their employees, what they can do for the community holistically in addressing the childcare crisis. So relationship building, space approach.
I couldn't agree more. I think partnerships, relationship building is key. It's critical to really moving the message and expanding opportunities and being able to amplify the work that we're trying to do. I just wanted to uplift Ashley's question in the chat. If there's anyone in Orange County who is doing this kind of work or knows about this work, beginning to start, we can put that information in the chat. At this moment, I don't know of any organization or approach in Orange County for doing this, but if anyone does know, we'd love to elevate that and share that in the chat. Going back to what Courtney was mentioning with those key elements to moving the work forward and talking about data, what about narratives and personal stories or testimony? How does that kind of communication also help tell the story of the work that needs to be done, is being done, and that we want to elevate?
Absolutely. In the work of collective advocacy that we do, Pamela, folks who are most impacted by the childcare crisis are also closest to the solutions. So Children First Collective, is really dedicated to helping providers and working with, parent voices and other parent organizations to empower them in readiness to be able to share those stories, right? And to put them in front of folks who have power to be able to give those ideas about solutions, and also to give that compassionate and authentic impact experience and testimonial. So the way that we've done that is particularly through the PB&J Fellowship. That's something we've committed to. Also have to be mindful and real to the fact that our childcare providers are working around the clock oftentimes, and them, as well as other organizations, don't always have the bandwidth or capacity to show up at an in-person public hearing, right? Or to give public comment on the phone all day until their queue number is called. So I think it's also pushing our thinking and innovation and creativity of how to capture those stories, do them justice in unique research, in being able to share them at important and critical times, even when capacity becomes an issue for folks.
Right. And I think you touched on a key point: capacity, right? How much can we all expel of ourselves when, the advocacy for childcare makes up one part of our life, but there's so much more that we also need to work on in terms of, being a whole human being. And so with that, and recognizing that momentum like this will have its highs and have its lows, I'm curious, what challenges or obstacles did you experience on this journey that you were able to overcome, that CFC was able to overcome as a group, or any individuals in the work?
I'll also welcome Erin to throw her thoughts into that. I think there are always going to be scalable challenges in this work. Again, we're working in a public service that is funded, and it is emotional and it can be hard. I think one of the ongoing challenges that we've come to really accept and embrace is the fact that everybody has a season in this work. And in having 18 different partners make a week commitment, as well as show up for a number of these different campaigns, we have to understand that folks are going to do what they can when they can, and that's okay, and that's going to be a beautiful thing. Sometimes that means that others are going to pick up the lion's share, and it's terrific that San Diego for Every Child, as well as the YMCA, has given permissions for greater capacity to do a lot of the administrative functions that are required for Children First Collective. So capacity is admittedly always going to be a challenge. I think another challenge that we've confronted is just understanding where and when and how to show up for our campaigns and advocacy items. We learn more every day, and sometimes it's a realization that, this should have been out, 2 go to get in front of the budget cycle, or we've missed the boat on a funding timeline for something. But that's okay, because building that authentic collaboration, even when we have those failures, we can still share that learning together. It feels good. So even when we're confronted with these challenges, because we have the comfort and the trusted space, understanding those challenges, I wouldn't say that any of it feels insurmountable.
Right. And I agree. I think that, at least for myself as an advocate in my personal learning journey, challenges present themselves, and there are opportunities for growth. There are opportunities to maybe change your perspective about what you were thinking, about what you maybe wanted to achieve, and just realizing that what's in front of you, it's giving you a chance to rethink, reimagine, re-envision. And so we shouldn't be scared of those opportunities. We should really embrace them and acknowledge them as part of the work that we're doing, because things change at any given moment. And so we do have to have flexibility and a level of preparedness for those changes. So, Courtney, if you had just one piece of advice that you could share for anyone watching who wants to bring this work to their community, what would that take home piece of advice be?
I would say it can start with you. Commit to meeting new the sector. Commit to understanding our historical power and difference in parts of our sector. Be the first person to reach out and help a meeting with folks across your sector, and see what it feels like to host that table. And you may surprise yourself stepping into a leadership role that's needed in your community that could be catalytic, just like Children First Collective has been for.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Courtney. I love that answer. I couldn't agree with you more. I wish that so many of us would take the bravery that we show up, in our everyday lives, and really share that with our community, find opportunities for leadership, because we, a lot of us on the call, we are women of color, and in our daily lives, there is leadership that we do that maybe we don't see it as that, but that's what it is. Whether it's, being the one who gets the ball rolling on dinner, or cleaning up, or, just making sure that everyone is doing well. We're the ones who check in on our friends and our family. So these are all leadership opportunities that we take in our everyday lives. And I would love, love, love to see us elevate ourselves and our community, our passions, our skills, our ability to build community, in our neighborhoods, at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. We can be the change. We are the change. And so with that, I just want to give another thank you and round of applause to Courtney for sharing amazing information. And we will have more webinars next year to continue to spotlight the best practices in the state of California that are really helping us to move the ball on, Build Up's mission, which is expanding access to affordable early care and education facilities throughout the state of California. So with that, we hope that you will take the last 5 minutes to share your thoughts with us. We have a survey that we're going to add into the chat. Should only take 3 minutes to complete, but we'll play some music. We'll give you some space to complete the survey. And again, just thank you all for your time today. It was amazing to be in community with you all, and I can't wait for the next time that we get to see you.